2.3 Fatigue and recovery. This side is about what is fatigue and recovery. Well, fatigue is a lack of energy and motivation that can be both physical and mental, and sometimes even both. Usually when you're fatigued, you'll feel weary, tired, and exhausted. Recovery is short-term or long-term. Short-term recovery occurs after an event or a match of some sort. Recovery refers to engaging in low-intensity exercise after any sort of. In a marathon, there are many factors that could cause you to fatigue earlier or later depending on the certain situation. For example, the wind plays a big part in the physiological and mental fatigue. If you're running into the wind, it will be a lot harder on your body since you'll be using a lot more energy to actually get going and run into the wind. This is the opposite effect if you run with the wind, since you'll be able to go faster and use less energy since the wind is pushing you. There are three different types of physiological fatigue. These are local, general, and chronic. Local fatigue is in a specific area. For example, it will be localized in the muscles due to the repeated contractions without any form of recovery. General is after training when you'll feel physically or psychologically weak. Finally, chronic fatigue is usually due to a weakened immune system. This will be usually from overtraining or not enough recovery time. There's also one psychological one, which is mental fatigue. This is where you think you can't go any further, but you actually will probably be able to go further if you had a better mindset. This mental fatigue could be due to not enough sleep, for example. Maximal intensity, high intensity, low duration, activity. I've chosen for my high intensity, low duration as a 100-meter sprint. The reason why I've chosen a 100-meter sprint is because it is a very big contraction in a short amount of time. The energy system that is used in the shot put is ATP-PC. I've mentioned that is because that would only use up the ATP part rather than the PC part. But whereas the 100-meter, it would use both ATP-PC since it lasts for 10 seconds. 3 seconds of ATP and 7 seconds of phosphocreatine. The reason why this is a high intensity activity is because they recruit a lot of fast glycolytic motor units. In addition, they will not fatigue very easily, and since it is a one-off thing, it will only happen once and you will have time to recover since there is a long wait for the next turn for a shot put, for example, but not for a 100-meter sprint. This type of activity will only use up the ATP. This is for shot put and PC sections. For a 100-meter sprint runner, they will only use up the ATP PC sections of it since the run only lasts for around 10 seconds if you're a highly trained athlete. An activity like shot put would be similar in the fact that it is a big contraction over a short period of time. This would only use the ATP section since it is a very short one-off contraction. This part is about ATP PC store depletion. The ATP PC will deplete since you are doing the maximal activity. Muscle PC levels can almost totally be depleted after maximal exercise. Casey et al. 1996. And the depletion of PC continues to the rapid decline in power output observed during such exercise. Salin et al. 1998. This can be seen in the graph about the PC stores. You can see at rest it is around 3 to 3.4 maximum. You can see when you're actually doing the exercise, it drops down to around 0.7. This is showing how reliant your body is on the PC stores, and it will take some time. It will take around 360 seconds to fully restore all of your PC PC stores. If you don't, however, you won't be able to perform at your full capability. You can take creatine supplements to help restore this quicker. Creatine is used in the muscle cells to store energy for sprinting and explosive exercise. Athletes can increase the amount of creatine in the muscle by taking creatine supplements, like I said. Although some studies report not much effect, the majority of them that the creatine supplementation that'll be around 20 grams a day for at least a week can increase the sprint performance by around 1 to 4%. If you take creatine supplementation for a month or two during training, it is reported to promote further gains in sprint as well as in strength and lean body mass. There is one side effect, however, but this is the only known one, which is increased body weight. Moderate intensity activity. This was a moderate intensity, moderate duration activity. A 400-meter sprint would usually take around 50 seconds to 1 minute. However, the world record is 43.03 seconds, which is held by a man called Wade van Niekerk. There are two energy sources that are used, two energy systems that are used in a 400-meter race. These are the ATP-PC system and the lactic acid system. For the first 10 seconds of the race, the runner will be using their ATP-PC system. Then, when that runs out, they would use their lactic acid system for the rest of the race. This is bad, as the lactic acid can really hinder athletes' potential. That is why an athlete would use an RAR to determine how fast they can go before lactic acid will build up. This would usually be just 0.1 underneath lactic acid would build up. Then towards the race, they would be able to speed up, so not as much lactic acid would build up. In these types of moderate intensity, moderate duration activities, the performer would mainly use glucose as their main fuel source for this race, as it is widely available in and around the muscles. Muscles rely heavily on the glycogen that is stored in them. The glycogen that is stored is used to fuel forceful and explosive muscle contractions. The acidity will increase and the pH will decrease since there is a buildup of lactic acid in the muscles. It's not the lactic acid that actually hurts, it's what that hurts after a couple of hours of exercise. It's actually the hydrogen ions that are formed. When hydrogen builds up in your muscles, it causes a drop in your body's pH, making it more acidic, interfering with your muscle fibers' ability to contract. OBLA stands for onset of blood lactate accumulation, and this is the point during exercise at which lactic acid builds up in your blood and fatigue sets in. The point where you are unable to go further is known as the lactate threshold or anaerobic threshold. You can see that on the graph to the bottom right of your screen, where you can see when lactate will start to really increase as the workload goes on. Glucose ingestion is where you will eat or drink, mainly drink, a solution that contains glucose in it. This will increase the liver's production of glucose, making it easier to work for longer. Soda loading is where you will drink something alkaline, something like baking soda, to reduce the acidity later on in the race. This will be in anticipation for a rise in the acidity. This is done to lower how acidic the muscles will get later on in the race. You will be able to perform for better and longer if you do take one of these supplements like baking soda. Triathlon, low intensity, high duration activity. There are many characteristics that will make up a low-intensity high-duration activity, more commonly known as a submaximal exercise. Some of these characteristics involve fatigue resistance, O2 delivery, and a high VO2 max. RER plays a big role. RER plays a big role in submaximal exercise. A low-intensity, high-duration activity will mainly use the aerobic system, since it is for over 2 hours. The main energy source will be fat, as you get a higher yield of ATP from it. You can see at the graph above the percentages of if you're working at a higher intensity, you'll be using carbohydrates. But if you're working at a lower intensity, you'll be mainly using fats. RER, or respiratory exchange ratio, is the ratio between the amount of carbon dioxide produced and the oxygen used. To estimate nutrient, this is to estimate nutrient contribution. Is used if an RER is 0.7, it means that you are using 100% of your fat store. But if your RER is at 1, it means you're using 100% of your carbohydrate store. The equation for RER is the amount of CO2 that leaves every minute divided by the amount of oxygen that enters every minute. If a person's RER is at 1.15, it means they are doing a maximal activity. There will be a point where you can work as maximally as possible without producing much lactic acid. This is usually around 0.1 before your lactate threshold. Glycogen is stored as a carbohydrate, but there are multiple places in the body where glycogen is stored. There is blood glucose, which only accounts to around 80 kilocalories. The liver glycogen has a lot more energy in it, around 400 kilocalories of energy. However, the muscle glycogen has 1,500 kilocalories, which is considerably more than the blood glycogen. There are many different fat stores around the body, ranging from serum-free fatty acids to adipose tissue. Serum-free fatty acids only contain around 7 kilocalories of energy, which is not very good as you can't use. There isn't a high amount of it. Serum triglycerides have 75 kilocalories of energy, which is better than serum-free acids, but still not very effective. The muscle triglycerides are a lot better than the serum triglycerides, having 2,500 kilocalories of energy available, but still not as good as the adipose tissue, which has a whopping 800,000 plus kilocalories of energy available. The adipose tissue, or fat, is the anatomical term for loose connective tissue. Its main role is to store energy in the form of fat, although it cushions and insulates the body. Adipose tissue is primarily located beneath the skin, but is also found around internal organs. A loss of potassium ions has an impact on the excitability of SFT in prolonged exercise. The impulses are slower or reduced, and the calcium ions that are triggered for any contraction. Calcium ions are a trigger required for any contraction, so anything that inhibits the release of calcium could cease muscle contractions. ACH is required to transfer the nerve impulse across the synaptic gap at the neuromuscular junction and initiate muscle contractions. Muscles work through the all or nothing law. If there is enough ACH, it will be able to go through. If there isn't enough ACH available to cross, then nothing will happen, since it hasn't reached the threshold for crossing the synaptic gap. If insufficient ACH arrives at the receptor sites, the muscle contraction cannot proceed and fatigue occurs. Cholinesterase is an enzyme that breaks down ACH after its role and prepares it to be used again. For another muscle contraction to begin, the synaptic cleft has to be cleared first of ACH by the enzyme cholinesterase. When there is excess ACH or lack of cholinesterase, fatigue results from the inability to generate a new